the one, the only, from way Northern California, the first congressional district in California, by the way, former Santa Barbara Gaucho, Kayte Christensen. Good morning, Kayte.
Good morning. Wow. Didn't know you knew all of these things.
He might have made that up.
You knew I knew about Santa Barbara and where you're from, but yeah, it's congressional district number 1 in all of California.
So here's one thing I do know about. You have always been a wealth of useless information.
That is true. No, that is very true.
It is true.
It is true. Well, it's like you're a big Frasier fan, which means you saw Cheers. I like to think I'm radio's Cliff Clavin.
Okay.
When you don't have to work the game, things are a little bit different. I know you still prep a little bit and all that fun stuff, and you know a little bit, quite a bit, I should say, about both these teams. So I want to make one of them sports radio statements, and then you argue with me or agree with it. The Sacramento Kings almost certainly need to have Zach LaVine as their guy tonight. Zach LaVine needs to have a good game. As he goes, this team goes.
Yeah, no, I 100% agree with that. And I'll take it kind of a step further. Zach needs to have a good game. And when he has good games, that means he's scoring from every level, right? The Kings absolutely need to be able to have consistency with their 3-point shot tonight. Like that has to be a big part of their offensive, pie, if you will, to be able to really have success tonight. And if they move on further, into the postseason.
Kayte, how important do you think it will be? They talk about pace a lot, and I've always wanted to play with pace. I think they did that better when they had De'Aaron. Maybe that kind of just makes sense based on his overall speed. But how much should pace be an issue for the Kings tonight as far as what they want to do against Dallas?
Well, you look back to that game against Portland at home when they, came out guns a-blazing and they were just, really aggressive in terms of attacking and playing with pace. And this is something that's really important when you talk about pace, you guys. A lot of people think that pace really is just isolated to the up and down, like how fast you get up and down the court. But really, this team, their pace in the half court is really critical for their success, because that means the ball is moving, bodies are moving, there's cuts, you're making the defense constantly have to work. When they struggle is when they revert kind of to that isolated, heavy offensive style. And it's good in situations, right? End of quarters, that kind of thing. When you're kind of trying to manage the clock at the end of the game where you're using as much of it as possible, like those situations are good. But the reality of the situation is when this team is stationary, like every team really, they're easier to defend. And so I think their pace, getting up and down is important, but maybe more important is there going to be their pace in the half court.
Kayte Christensen joining us. When we think of Anthony Davis, we think of the middle of this defense, the center of the team. He's actually been doing a lot of power forward for Jason Kidd. Derek Lively will be playing tonight. So that's 7'1" and 6'11", basically, in the middle of the court for the Dallas Mavericks. Do you think Doug messes around with the Lithuanian lasagna duo at some point tonight? You think we see Jonas and Domantas?
Lithuanian lasagna. Is that what you guys came up with?
No, wasn't that Charles Barkley?
Yeah.
Jason, yeah, Charles did it originally for Sabonis. Go ahead. You can use that if you want.
Okay. I'll pass on that one. I'll let Chuck have that. You know what? It's interesting because I think that, yes, with him playing power forward, which is really what Anthony Davis wants to do. He doesn't want to be center. He didn't like playing center with the Lakers. That was one of the kind of areas of contention with him. It changes things because the Kings, in essence, kind of that means Keegan Murray is technically at the power forward, right? And then you have to mess with matchups and so on and so forth. So I'm going to be really interested to see how they start tonight. And then from there, I do think we see kind of the double big lineup, if you will. However, the first time we saw it was against Dallas. And it was when Dallas went small is when the Kings went big. And I was really surprised at how effective it was with two bigs on the floor going against a smaller lineup. So we'll see. I would be shocked if we don't, see it tonight. The question is going to be, how much do we see it? And I think, kind of getting a feel for Doug's, coaching style, he'll try things and he'll give it some time. If it's not successful the first time he does it, I don't know that we see it again, because that's kind of, I'm basing that on kind of what we've seen since December, right? And what he does. But yeah, in essence, it would be effective, but then it's like, they're not going to start with the double big lineup. So then you're going into rotations, right? Like how often are you going to get Anthony Davis and Lively on the floor together when it's not against the starters? So that's going to be where he's going to have to play with rotations if he wants to see the double big lineup. Because I not in a million years, he's not going to start that way.
Kayte, we were talking, you talked earlier about the importance of Zach LaVine having a big game tonight, and I agree 100% on that. But you also would like to have DeMar DeRozan have a big game. These are two very important pieces. They've done it at times where they've both been good, and it's kind of kept in the flow, and everything just kind of looked right. And then there's been other times where it's either been a take your turn or maybe too much ISO for DeMar. Are they doing a better job, or what's the best way they can get kind of the greatness of what you get with Sabonis, with LaVine, with DeRozan, and put it all together?
Yeah, I mean, they've done it at times, right? And when both of them have gone off, if you go back to the games, it's been really interesting how it happens. It'll be like Zach has 10 points in the first quarter, and then DeMar has 10 points in the second quarter, and it kind of goes back and forth. So there's two things about that. The positive thing about that, in my opinion, is that it shows that they're very cognizant of when someone has a hot hand and you want to make sure they're getting touches, right? So if Zach comes out and starts well, this team has been really good about, making sure he's getting the ball. That's what happened in the first quarter. I believe it was in the last game that Zach had 10 points in the first quarter, and then he didn't score in the second quarter. And so that's the only thing to me that the negative side of it is, like, when there is a substitution and someone comes out and then they're back together in that time, maybe it's DeMar that's going. Like, I would like to see them look for the hot hand, but also not have it be every single possession. And that, to me, sometimes is where it goes a little bit south. Because in all honesty, I mean, the reality is you want to try and never, the same way defensively when you're guarding a player, like a superstar player. We talk about it with Steph Curry all the time. You want to give them, you never want to give them a steady diet of the same thing. You want to keep them guessing. The same is true on the offensive end. You don't want offensively to be going to the same well over and over and over again, because the defense adjusts and then it really can disrupt your rhythm. So it's got to be kind of in between, in my opinion. And we'll see how they approach it tonight, just based on, who gets going.
Kayte Christensen joining us. So we talked about, we agree on the importance of Zach LaVine. If I were to tell you one other player would have 25 points tonight, be it Keegan, DeMar, Keon, Domantas, which one other than LaVine you think would give them the best chance to win?
Well, I'll say this. I think that, everyone has to play well. This is just where you're at in the season, and you have to play well within your role. And I'm trying to remember what game it was recently. I think it was Detroit, actually. It was where Domas came out and had a blazing hot start. And then he didn't really, statistically add too much to it over the course of the last three quarters. But then someone else went off. And then at the end of the game, it was Zach and DeMar in that game. And so I think it's really, really critical for Domas to have a big night. Because of just how it shifts the defense, right? If he is not what's the word for it? Why can't I think of it? If he's not productive on the inside and making that defense have to shift to the middle, they're not going to get the same open looks on the outside that they need to get, in my mind. So if I had to choose from everybody, I would say Domas is critical to getting out to an early start, but also being very effective on the boards. Because a lot of his offense in the end really comes from what he does on the offensive glass. So, that's also another thing when you've got great scorers from the outside. It's not always about make sure the ball is getting inside to the big. They're so focused on boxing him out that the defense has to shift to him the same way that they do when they're looking to actually physically get the ball in the low post.
Kayte, the Kings have a lot of players who have been in this kind of situation before, the play-in, DeRozan, LaVine. A lot of the guys last year were in this spot.
JV has been in the
all of them
more than anybody in the NBA.
Isn't that crazy? Is that even any kind of factor for tonight as far as having more guys that have been in that spot?
Jason, you get the good question comment.
Oh, come on!
Yeah.
What? That was
Yep.
Wow. Okay.
It's a great question because this is really different. The play-in adds a different element than even a playoff series. Obviously, the series is a 7-gamer. There is more pressure on a play-in game because it is a one-and-done situation. When you're in the 9-10, it's 100%. You have to win tonight. And so I do think that from a mental perspective, even just how they've prepared over the last couple of days, how they're preparing today, it's about getting your mind in the right, frame of mind, because it's a very unique situation. It's like every game is a game 7, basically. And so, yeah, I think that it does help a lot to have those guys, and not even necessarily like saying like, oh, they're talking to the team about it, right? But it's helping from the way that they individually prepare. And because you have so many of them that have been in that situation, I think that bodes well in terms of kind of the collective preparation from an individual, mental perspective.
How was your Survivor viewing party last week?
Yeah, on the 9th. I'm trying to remember the day. It was fantastic. It was really, really great. It was a really wonderful turnout, and it was exciting for me personally to be able to be there and be a part of it. So it was pretty awesome. It's a lot of, basically like hold my purse, take a picture type thing, which I absolutely love. I absolutely love being on that side of it.
Which is funny because usually you're on the other side when anyone who's around you is holding purse and taking picture of you and somebody else. So it's like a switcheroo.
It's a massive switcheroo because it's like, I don't know how to put it. Like, people in Sacramento know me. It's a little bit different. Being on Survivor, it's a different element. So it's really interesting to sit back and kind of just enjoy kind of the interactions.
Well, hopefully much more of that, and we get much more interactions with the Sacramento Kings playing postseason games after tonight. In the meantime, 7 p.m. right here on Sactown Sports. Thank you, Kayte. Have a great week, and we'll talk to you next week.
Hey, just to make sure that all the listeners know, like, we don't broadcast a game tonight, but I will be doing the pre-half and post-game show on NBC. So tune in to us so that we can give you all the insight. See, look at my little plug there, Dave.
Nice.
You like that?
You're doing TV too? You're doing TV? What? Look,
I'm doing pre-half and post-game show.
All right, listen, don't be nervous. Just pay attention to your producer in your ear. You'll be fine. Okay?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I have no experience doing this, so I'm a little nervous. Yeah.
All right. Well, don't be nervous. Just think of all the audience in their underwear. I'll talk to you later. We'll see you next Wednesday. Bye.
Bye-bye.
That's former sideline reporter and pre-half and post-game host and current Kings analyst, Kayte Christensen. We're going to pause for 30 seconds. Jason wants to